All right. According to Matthew McConaughey. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Morning. Hello, Mark.
Good to see you. Good to see you. And thanks for participating on our conversations with leaders who care. And despite the fact that we're new in our relationship and introduced, I definitely was easy to recognize that we got a lot of shared values and mission and things of that nature. So I'm pretty psyched about this conversation and developing the relationship in general. So
likewise. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Why don't we start with, if you could just briefly introduce yourself. Don't tell the whole story because then we'll have nothing left to talk about. But just a little bit about yourself and as someone told me to ask recently, and something maybe that nobody knows yet that you'll just reveal now about you.
Certainly. No, I appreciate the time. Great to be on here. Definitely resonates with all the different values and art set that you laid out, especially on our call around leaders who care. And yeah, I've been in America for 2 years. I'm originally from South Africa. I moved here with the opportunity to grow in a bigger scaled markets. Very fortunate from upbringing back home. And my background's always been in B2B fintech. That's always been like the sector that I've been strongest in from an entrepreneurial perspective. And now currently focused in the buy now, pay later space for businesses, where we enable companies to purchase an invoice now or purchase a service and pay it over a period of time. But in terms of, I think, yeah, I was raised by a single mom, very, very close to like a mommy's boy. So I think the one thing that a lot of people don't get in the beginning is this: they see a very alpha male presentation of myself. Although when they get to know me, they realize how sensitive and soft I actually am inside. Yeah, I'd say that's like the hidden cover. But very grateful to reside here in Los Angeles, and yeah, it's great to be on the show.
There's a Lady Gaga song that talks about if you know, once you get by my outside, if you get inside, you'll find out who I really am, type of thing. And
Yes.
just kind of reminded me of that, although she's way better looking than you are.
Great.
Share with us a little bit. I like to ask about the why, but I like to ask it in a different way before we delve into your background and stuff. Why do you do what you do?
I think a big mission in terms of, from like a career perspective, I grew up from a scarcity element. I never really grew up with like much wealth. I grew up around a lot of wealth. So I think growing up seeing, striving for financial means, things of that nature. I think a very big purpose of, what I'm doing, especially in fintech, is to enable people to be more financially efficient, whether it be through the technologies they use, the education they have. That's a big drive for me. And I just think that there's been a lot of situations in my life that have made me aware of how short life is. And I think just being the way I was brought up, especially by my mom, in terms of leaving a good name, doing things from the goodness of one's heart, like it's been a continual journey. And I'm honestly always learning. So from a business and a personal perspective, like really honing down on my purpose and where I came from and how I was raised, that sets aside the direction for me always.
Yeah, that's really great. And talking to a lot of people, not just for this series, but over the years, it's not easy being a single mom, or even a single dad for that matter, but mostly they're single moms. And so it's good for her for what she's done. And I know in our conversations you give her a lot of credit, which is important. It's taken, some of the stuff we're talking about, it's taken decades for corporate leaders especially to realize that aligning themselves, their brand, their dollars and whatnot, with social and environmental impact is actually good for business. And it's also good for attracting the best people, because especially now, the best people want to go work with people that care. They want to make money, but they want someone, there's a purpose going on. So as you said, you've been engaged in building companies with a focus on financial systems, fintech, etc., from early on in Johannesburg and now to LA. So in each of those, you have an economic and financial impact that you want to make, apparently.
100%.
Share with us a little more of how that's evolved, in the sense of how different is it for you, or was it for you in Joburg versus LA, South Africa versus the United States, and how that's evolved, what you're seeing in leaders now with respect to, how and why you and they are differentiating yourselves as leaders who care.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So from that first point around differentiation between South Africa and America, it's a very different environment in terms of scale, culture, and openness. So I think being in an environment such as the East Coast or the West Coast, there's a lot more culture, a lot more international influence, and a lot more foundation to scale things. So I think from a market perspective and in terms of scale, that was a very big motivator and difference back from South Africa. And in terms of I think from the impact perspective of how I've worked, it's very similar. Like I see myself from a point of exposure. So if I can expose sort of my skills and business development and incubation skills on a company, but with the right people, it's kind of that derivative impact that I hope and I feel. So if I can affect one person who's more prone to affect a multitude of people, whether it be internally through managing the company or through externally how they release the product into the market and how that product takes shape with consumers. That's always been my focus, is like working with the right people, connecting to the right people. And it's a continually learning engagement, but those are the two areas that have been propelled moving from South Africa to here.
Do you find that people in business in South Africa and even Africa in general, and you've had exposure in the world, are realizing that that caring about social and environmental impact is good for business?
I think it definitely is a global trend. I think when moving to California, people were a lot more they emphasize this importance a lot more, particularly in California. But it's definitely underpinned in a lot of ways in South Africa, and I believe the whole world. So from my experience, I do think so.
Super cool. My grandparents are from Kiev, from the Ukraine, and they always used to say with their accent as long as we talked about health before, as long as you have your health, that's the most important thing. And
it is definitely
good too, but health is number one. So technology is still speeding along like no tomorrow. In fact, a client of mine had a great phrase recently. He said, "This year has flown by slowly," he said. And I thought it was kind of brilliant because it feels like that in a way. And but technology is still speeding. Sometimes during crisis, a lot more entrepreneurial stuff happens. You got the pandemic. We're getting close to vaccine, but there's still major stuff going on. You got the tipping point for racism, racial justice, and social justice. You got wildfires. You got a whole bunch of stuff. Basically, Mother Nature is not a happy camper right now. And I want to know what your thoughts are, obviously from your perspective, as to, has there been an awakening because of more time to think or whatnot with respect to what is most important in our life, in what we do, in at work, in our community, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I definitely feel that a major factor is who you work with. I think that is critical. The company that you keep around you. I think just trusting the company in terms of the values that they lead by is very important. So from a personal perspective, I learned over the years that it wasn't that advantageous just to deal with certain types of characters that are of a certain wealth bracket or certain attitude. Even though you feel that they can get you there financially, if their values and dreams aren't aligned to the way you see the world and treat others, there's going to be very little opportunity there. You'll actually probably lose out from an opportunity cost perspective in terms of your time. I think that, like the characters, the values, I think being cognizant about the goals beforehand with any people that you work with or work for, I think laying that out just very transparently. It's similar to like going into an arrangement from a dating perspective. If you lay out your intentions in the beginning, I think there's less room for bad expectations or expectations not met. And I think just so trusting the guts and laying out those values beforehand with any engagements, I think is critical. And I don't think a lot of people do that because they're shy of probably the perceptions that creates with other people around them, etc., or ego. But I feel that that's a very effective.
What do you think about what's going on then with and how it relates to business, with basically the future of work has become the present faster than we ever thought it would happen? So you got the obvious one is remote, and a lot of companies are saying, staying home. Others are saying, well, the spontaneous, meeting somebody in a hall creates ideas, and they're both not wrong. How do you think that's impacting how we work and what we think is important?
Yeah, I think sure. I think there's a lot of answers for that question. I feel that yeah, I think the fundamental thing that comes to me is literally like learning from the past and just using experiences like sort of like this pandemic and everything to realize how vulnerable time is, and to quantify one's time, whether it be through feeling or impact that you give or how much should be earned. But I think the perspective around time is critical, and you can feel what is, and like working on that with the right people, and you can see what they want out of it. I think that is probably the most like pivotal aspect to work around is time, and valuing that from gut feeling, ROI.
So
That's how I feel.
you obviously in building companies, you rely obviously again on people. What do you see the both current and the future? Because there's a lot of upcoming leaders who care also. What do you see their role is to ensure? I call it the three well-beings. There's the financial well-being, there's physical, and there's mental, spiritual, whatever you want to call it, well-being that people are all looking for. They don't want to give up the money, but they also are not just going to take a job for money, and they don't want to
Yes.
do less because it feels good. They want both, which I think is great. So what do you think the role is for leaders creating companies like yourself, building companies, and even those managing the companies have to make that happen?
I definitely think being able to expose one's vulnerability is key. So especially as a leader, if you can go into an engagement to find the right people by exposing how you are human, I think that's really key. And also from the person either joining a company or the person engaging in a partnership, I think the transparency of like what they're looking to get out of it and showing the vulnerability of like where their faults are or what they're trying to learn, whether in a personal perspective or a business perspective. I think that leaders can find like the right types of people if they open themselves up a little bit more and become more human, and also request that like level of personalization from others, like not just they should request being more vulnerable and understanding more around what their goals are. Because I think if you like one of the recent quotes I was reading through a book called Limitless is about how burnout occurs, and how burnout, for instance, isn't a factor of being tired. It's more a factor of being tired doing what you don't really want. But it's the antithesis is we shouldn't be burning out because we should be ignited. So find leaders should really look for what ignites other people. And that should be like the answer, I think, how they should lead from being vulnerable themselves and also seeing what really ignites others instead of like fitting them into a mold.
Yeah, that's actually a fantastic point. That almost brings me to a conversation I had with an executive earlier today about number one, listening to people, and number two, being available, if you will, is kind of how he put it. And this was an ex top executive at a global bank, basically, and he said he would tell his managers that every day he should go around and not just say hi to the people that are in his group, but actually sit down, even if it's for a minute, actually sit down in their office and saying, how are you? And just that act makes the person feel, man, this person really does care. And even, I thought it was interesting, he said, don't stand at the door and say, how are you? Sit down there. 30 seconds, a minute, doesn't matter. The act is important. Kind of relates to what you're saying to some degree is, not to be cute, but really being a leader who cares about their people.
Yeah, that's correct. 100% aligned.
So when you create a company and build a company, a lot of times people would say, well, I don't have time to create a culture. I got to build this thing. I got to raise money. I got to do stuff. How do you address that? Because in fact, if you're not building a culture, you also are building a culture.
100%. It's yeah, like not hypocritical, but it's whatever you lay out, whether it's ignorance or whether it's execution or connecting with the people the right way, you are laying out a culture. So I think I've been through a lot of experience in the past where if you don't make the right decisions up front between who you're working with, or even like who you're entering in terms of like the relationship with, you're wasting both people's time, and you're just kind of extending the inevitable, which is unfair on the other person, let alone yourself or the company. So I think just being really, really upfront in the beginning in a very sincere manner, with the expectations, the goals, trusting your guts, and also, there also comes the chance of like giving the person a chance. We all aren't, what do you call it, palm readers or like future, we can't really necessarily tell, even though our guts are strong. So I definitely feel, giving the person time, and letting them, adapt. I think like there needs to be a good balance between those.
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about, I usually use a lot of sports analogies, and to your point, and I think it totally applies to business too. And what you just said is, if an athlete, be it a hockey player, football player, soccer, whatever, makes a mistake, the coach has options, get rid of him, bench him, the whole thing, or really talking to him about the mistake and saying you shouldn't have done this, shouldn't have done that, and that, but we really need you. Get out and make it happen. I believe in you. Is probably when you're either going to get the best ROI or lose the best ROI you could have got, if you make the wrong decision and fire them. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that approach is the right approach. I think just just being true to yourself is key in that decision and with that person. But I think the way that you approach them and the way that you lead them, as long as you lead them in a better circumstance, and I think the true leaders I'd love to be around and work with are people that will take that criticism or that feedback well, and whoever they try to bring into their life from like a business perspective or as a leader, they try to better them, whether it be through a personal perspective or teaching them new skills. I think that's pretty key as well.
So before we go, tell us a little bit about your current companies that you're playing with, if that's the appropriate word. Tell us a little bit about them.
So as mentioned, they're mostly tailored in the B2B payment space. BizPay is essentially a company very similar to a firm or Afterpay, where they enable companies to, purchase a certain product or a certain service now and be able to pay before. So that company's like main mission is helping cash flow, especially for smaller businesses that they potentially struggle to hire or pay, upfront costs. This gives them the opportunity to get better talent, to get bigger purchases upfront by managing their cash flow. The other company, AidBank, just went through Techstars. That's a business that enables NGOs to transfer and manage their money more efficiently and help avoid a lot of fraud, so that the finances can get to the end charitable points in a seamless and more measured manner. So all these companies, whether they're from an entrepreneurial or an advisory perspective, I make sure that their end purpose is to ease finances or money management, and empower the world in some way or form, particularly markets like NGOs, small to medium-sized businesses. So that's kind of like my hypothesis or the target profile. And then, of course, the biggest thing is the people I work with. I'm, very blessed to work with people that are mission-driven, that have a good reputation, have got a good name, that we both can learn from each other.
That's awesome. So last question, if pretend I just graduated high school or college for that matter, and again, all this is going on. Didn't get to go to prom or whatever, and everything's like a mess. The economy, I'm living back at home, or whatever. And I come to you and say, you're doing all this great stuff. What do I do? What do I do?
Look, I think it's definitely gut driven. There's a lot of things that are born into you, how you're raised, in terms of whether it be from a motivational perspective or through a passion. But it sounds cliche, but you've got to find like what you passionate about, an area that's really big, and you need to understand if you're an operator or you're more of a diverse person. And I also think that like finding the right people to mold from, that have more experience in your sector, and speaking to them, there's nothing more powerful than the retrospective outlook, to get opinions from people that you look up to and see their lessons in order to save you time. And I think going through that exercise a few times, depending if you're a person that focuses or not, you'll find what niche, but it takes proactiveness. You got to go out there, look at your immediate network, look what areas would interest you, research or do some job hunting, or I think like that would be a proactive step I would suggest.
All right. Where were you when I needed you like 30 years ago? Hey, thanks for participating and actually being one of the leaders who care. We really appreciate it.
100%. Thank you, Mark.